I'm Kirk Harnack. On This Week in Radio Tech, it's Tom Ray, Chris Tarr, and Chris Tobin. We're talking rising floodwaters, the public file, more audio processing, and the public airwaves. Here we go.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This Week in Radio Tech, episode 82, recorded May 11th, 2011. Transmitter Sharks. This episode of This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies streamed to your PC, Mac, or TV instantly. Plus, get DVDs by mail in about one business day. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. And by Axia Audio and the new Radius IP audio console. Feature-rich, affordable IP audio consoles from Axia on the web at axiaaudio.com. It's time for This Week in Radio Tech. Hi, I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. You've tuned into the show where we talk about everything to do with radio technology, and that means audio, and whether it's high-fidelity audio or just getting some audio from here to there, the transmitter, antennas. We even talk about receivers, and yeah, of course, we talk about the other things that radio stations are doing, like streaming and some metadata to go along with that streaming, contesting, and things like that. We got a lot of things to talk about, and occasionally we actually have guests on the show who know what they're talking about. But for this episode, you're just going to have to put up with us. As I said, I'm Kirk Harnack. I'm employed full-time by the folks at Telos, Omni, and Axia. I'm so glad they keep me around. But also on the show with us, one of our co-hosts is Tom Ray from the Hudson Valley of New York. Hello, Tom.
Greetings, Kirk, and how are you doing tonight?
I'm lovely. What's up with you?
Well, I'm the VP of Engineering for Buckley Broadcasting, WOR Radio in New York City, which is about 50 miles south of where I'm sitting right now. It's been a beautiful last couple of days in New York, and certainly happy that spring is finally here.
Me too. You know, here in Nashville today, it got up to 92 degrees. Spring is definitely here.
Now, how far are you from the river? You know, we've heard about the flooding down there.
Nashville's a good 3.5, 4-hour drive from the Mississippi River, but I have a daughter who lives just a half a mile from Mississippi River. She's okay. And some other relatives that live pretty close, but they're all okay. I did see, I got a radio station in Cleveland, Mississippi, which is about where the cresting is going on now, but Cleveland's in from the river 15 miles or so. Greenville, Mississippi, we're leasing some radio stations there, and they got some trouble there. The casinos are all overrun with water in Greenville, Mississippi. So that's a problem there. I don't know about the Tunica casinos. I haven't seen any stories about those. But yeah, in fact, we've got some water pictures coming up in just a few minutes. Let's move on and also introduce, also from New York City, Manhattan, it's Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Kirk. Tom, how are you this evening?
Hey, what's up in your world?
Not much. Broadcast technologist for the CBS radio stations here in New York. 3 AMs, 3 FMs, and right now, as Tom pointed out, the weather has been very, very nice, very moderate. I think next couple of days will be sunshine and warmth, and then the rain rolls in on the weekend. How's the
Tom? How's the forecast? Like I should be asking you. I'm the meteorologist, right? How's the forecast for the for the SBE picnic?
Actually, I haven't looked at it that far out. It's 2 weeks from tomorrow. So, not quite sure. Hopefully, it's going to hold up.
That should be no problem to forecast.
But you know, even in years where it's done a little bit of rain, done a little bit of sprinkling, not a problem. We just go into the garage and party there.
There you go. All right. Hey, also with us from Muckwonago, Wisconsin, it is the cheap top hootenanny engineer for the intercom stations. Hey, it's Chris Tarr. Hey, Chris.
Hi there. You know, I always laugh when we go New York City, Muckwonago, Wisconsin. You know, rocking the heartland here. I am the director of engineering for Intercom's radio stations in Milwaukee and Madison. I'm also co-founder of the virtual engineer at broadcastengineering.info. And let's see, I got some storms rolling through here tonight. Actually, just lost power just before the show started. Fortunately, I have a UPS, so we stayed in line. But let's see, my day was turning on a new Burke lady up at a transmitter site. I got a new remote control, and I always love putting those in. They're so much fun.
Yeah, I have never gotten to use any remote control that had a female voice. You referred to it as the Burke Lady. Tell me about that.
Oh, yeah, well, she actually has two names. The Burke Lady is what we call it, the engineers call it. My wife calls it the Transmitter Lady because, it'll call at 3 in the morning, and she'll answer the phone in the female voice, hello. And, my wife, hey, it's the Transmitter Lady. Get the phone. Somebody actually, it was yesterday, I had posted a picture on Facebook. I had it all, decked out, all labeled and everything. And somebody went, oh, that's so nice looking. And I said, yeah, it looks nice until you plug it into a phone line and it calls you at 2 in the morning.
Hey, Chris, Chris, don't leave the programming manual out. I had a friend. I had a friend at a station once. The overnight jock got bored one night. He left the programming manual out, so he reprogrammed the message and purposely tripped an over power alarm. And when the guy answered the phone, what he got was, the oral exciter is hot.
So we're talking about, those of you who aren't experienced with these things, we're talking about remote control systems for transmitters, and a common way to control them is by dial-up telephone or by cell phone. So you make a phone call to them, and they can call out to you with spoken words based on that appropriately tell you what's going on, more or less. Famously, one of the first speaking remote controls, I suppose, was the sign system RFC-1B. And
ones that have the Three Stooges sound effects.
Yes, John Payton apparently was a Three Stooges fan. John was the inventor, designer of that box, and they had all kinds of nyuk 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 things like that. It would say, my goodness. Yeah, we've programmed a few funny things to say in ours as well. In fact, you remember the early version of the sign systems RFC-1B? It had a voice that was not so intelligible. Right? It was, and I wish I knew the right words to describe it. It was definitely, I want to say mnemonic, but that's not the right word. Maybe somebody in the chat room would know what I'm talking about. But it was a voice that was very much computer created, and not any similarities with the human spoken voice were kind of coincidental. Even though
it was very, very monotone. It's like, hello, this is the RFC.
There you go.
1A.
Yes,
yeah.
It was monotone. And so I installed one of these remote controls in Tennessee, small town, at a small black gospel station. And I built them a new control room, built them a new transmitter site, and the place was really, for a small town station, it was just hot. I mean, they really liked it, except they didn't like the remote control. Once in a while, it would call in. I showed them how to call to it, and once in a while, it would call in with something being wrong. And I came back for a visit one time, and the morning guy says, Mr. Harnack, he said, we can't understand what dude is saying.
Tell you what, I know what it's saying, and I don't understand what it's saying.
Exactly. That's I have a hard time understanding him too. Well, then, not too long after that, Sign came out with a chip replacement that gave it a voice that was that is still the voice they use today, and it's much more intelligible.
Well, I had I had 3 stations at once that had those things, and one was Curly, one was Larry, and one was Mo. And the phone would ring, and my wife would pick up the phone, and she'd go, Larry's calling. Okay, I know which station that is.
The Burke really did a good job with the voice on the ARC-16s. I mean, the Burke Lady is very very intelligible, very natural sounding. In fact, I think when they first released it, they called it natural voice, and it's very intelligible, and you can program your call letters in, and so I know immediately because I've got about 5 of these, so I need to know right away which one's calling me. So they do a pretty good job with it now. But yeah, those early versions of the remotes were really you might as well just drive out to the transmitter site and take the readings because you don't know what they're saying.
Hey, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of our show here in just a minute. I want to tell you that this episode of This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Netflix, where you can watch thousands of TV episodes and movies streamed to your PC, your Mac, or your TV instantly. Plus, you can get DVDs by mail in about a business day. For your free 30-day trial, not that everybody on listening and viewing this podcast isn't already on Netflix. If you're not, pay attention here. This is for you. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit, and you'll get a free 30-day trial of Netflix. And a little bit later on the show, we're going to have a few picks for you from the engineers of the Twit podcast. Also, the podcast is brought to you by Axia Audio and the new Radius IP audio console. And it is affordable, folks. It is under $6,000, and you can probably get a discount on that too. So check it out on the web at axiaaudio.com and look for the new IQ console, which is now shipping, and the Radius console as well. We'll tell you more about that a bit later on. Okay, guys, I got a couple of emails here to check in. Yes, we get letters. Oh, we get letters, and here's one of them here I thought everybody would be interested in hearing about. This is from Jeremy. And Jeremy writes, Kirk, I just want to drop you a short note and say thanks for the great show on Twit. Further, Twit inspired me to study and pass a technician class ham license. I just passed. Yeah. All right. Congratulations. I don't have his call sign here. Maybe that'll come along later. Jeremy just passed it yesterday. It was an old interest that I had when I was in high school, and I didn't pursue it. The show is great. It's a great lineup of hosts. Each one provides a contrast. Okay. I really enjoy it. Best, Jeremy from Washington. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Also, a regular listener. In fact, he's been on the show before, I think. Didn't we? We had Peter on, didn't we? Peter Smurden from Australia. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We did have it on.
Regarding, we did on the episode we did with Joey, of the episode called Palangi Joe about Samoa. Peter said he enjoyed the discussion about broadcast processing and music mastering. He says, I regard modern radio processing as real-time mastering. Kind of an interesting take on that. Mastering can be defined as optimizing the audio for the particular medium, whether it's vinyl, CD, cassette, MP3, or AM or FM or TV. That's what broadcast processing is about. It's preparing the audio for the transmission medium. That sounds pretty accurate. I like that. Does that work for you guys?
Works for me.
Well, yeah, it's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly on target.
And actually, that's Peter. Interestingly, his statement there, you're preparing the audio for the medium that you're going to transmit it over. This was kind of the subject of a presentation that I did for Omnia. When there's a lot of folks who are using broadcast processors to process audio for their web streaming, for their internet streaming. And, okay, that'll work, but, it can be better. It's kind of like, well, I use this AM audio processor for my FM. Well, okay, I'm not in stereo, and it doesn't allow for the 75 microsecond preemphasis curve, but, there's audio on the air. That's what you get when you use a processor that's not meant for internet streaming, or for a codec, for coded audio, to do that kind of job. And that's been the subject of a couple of shows here. I felt like Peter's comment would allow me to point out that if you're doing web streaming and you want that stream to sound as good as possible, you need to use an audio processor that preps the audio for the interesting things that a audio codec does to the audio. One of the examples that I've used is the process of AM amplitude modulation and the process of frequency modulation. These are kind of one-dimensional processes. We understand the math involved, and processor companies can build processors to make the audio fit best and get the most through that medium and that modulation and demodulation process. But audio coding is actually a moving target. So an MP3 encoder or an AAC encoder, or when you get down to something really efficient like an HEAAC V2 encoder, these encoders are not simple one-dimensional mathematical processes. They're multidimensional. I mean, they change on the fly exactly how they're handling different parts of audio to squeeze the most benefit out of it. And if the audio processor in front of that takes at least some of that variability in the process into account, then the audio processor can, prepare the audio and at least not let the codec have to work harder than it has to code the audio and get the bits down to a very low bit rate. That's something that's worth at least chatting about for a second. I've kind of thrown down the gauntlet and said, hey, if you're going to process for streaming, use a processor that's meant for streaming because it will make a difference. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, no, it will, and the same would go for an HD radio signal, as opposed to, or not as opposed to, but along with an audio stream. One of the things that you generally don't find on a processor that's made for streaming is a clip control, because you don't want to really harshly clip the audio, because clipping causes harmonics, and that could confuse the codec, and you could eliminate your primary frequencies and end up with the harmonics, and you don't want to know what that sounds like.
That's a real good point. In fact, that brings up what people who design processors for coded audio have found out. You don't want any clipping at all, because clipping makes, as you said, makes harmonics, makes third and fifth and seventh harmonics of the fundamental. So it's just more spectra to code. And you also want to have, it's a good idea to have a decent balance of the lows, mids, and highs. In fact, a great way to handle the audio, I should point out, for AM and FM broadcasting, we tend to do clipping because we want to maintain a very precise and high modulation level. With coded audio, that really doesn't matter. You just don't want to go above 0 dBFS, but it's not important to have all the audio at a perfectly clipped level. So you use limiting, but you don't just use regular limiting. You can use look-ahead limiting, and look-ahead limiting, when done properly, can give you a nicely controlled signal that still has some dynamic punch in it. I'm sorry, I was about to interrupt whoever was going to speak next. Seems like Mr. Tarr, were you going to pipe up?
Well, yeah, for, when you're talking about processing for streaming, or even, for example, HD subchannels, Omnia does this very well. You want to also limit the bandwidth, because you don't want to have audio out there that isn't going to get coded anyway if you're using a low bit rate sort of encoder. I know that the Omnia 1 has an adjustable bandwidth, almost like a shelving control on there, so that if you're not pumping in a huge amount of highs into a codec that really isn't going to be able to process that anyway. And what happens is that also clears up a lot of the unnatural sounding artifacts from the codec trying to re-encode things that just never really existed in the first place. It's trying to fake it and recreate some things that really, you're trying to cram all this, 20 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. And if you just take a standard processor and process it and try to cram it through a low bit rate codec, you end up with a whole lot of artifacts. So one of the things, one of the tricks you do is, obviously you roll off your audio, the highs and the lows, just below what the sample rate is, and that will also eliminate some of those artifacts. And streaming processors do that very well.
You mentioned rolling off the highs, and one place where this really comes into play is, so many times people do coding with a PC that's got a sound card of some kind. So doesn't much matter whether it's an AES digital input or an analog input. If you feed audio into a sound card and then you encode that audio later on, and you encode it at a bit rate or the sampling rate of the encoder, if you end up getting audio energy above the Nyquist frequency, that's half of the sampling rate, above the Nyquist frequency, you're going to end up with aliasing distortion. We ought to do a visual on this sometime, or you can go on Wikipedia and look up aliasing distortion. But you're going to end up with non-harmonically related products back in the audio. Aliasing distortion kind of acts like a mirror, and or kind of it flips these products back into the range of audio that is being coded, that's below the Nyquist frequency, but it's not harmonically related to the audio that's there. And so you end up coding artifacts that sound nasty, that don't sound good at all. Well, how do you solve this? Well, if you rely on the low-pass filter in a typical PC sound card, that doesn't work very well. Any energy above the Nyquist frequency of the system has got to be way, 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 way down, like 70, 80, 90 dB down. Otherwise, it's going to get coded to some degree, and that coding, again, non-harmonically related to the audio, it's just going to sound like junk up there. So you want to use an audio processor or an audio filter of some kind that's going to knock this audio way, way, way down above a given frequency, like whatever the Nyquist frequency of the system would be. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, another thing we've discussed too before when processing for audio streaming and for HD codecs is sometimes less is more. A lot of these codecs, especially AAC based codecs, rely on information that's kind of masked in the audio to do its thing. Well, if you process the heck out of that audio and you're basically feeding it a square wave, the codec really doesn't have a lot to work with. It can't mask what it needs to mask to reduce the bit rate, and you end up sounding pretty bad too. So, I know a lot of people try to emulate FM radio processors. It's gotten better. The audio processing has gotten better to where it sounds better with less. But, a lot of people take like a Sound Solutions and start cranking on the knobs, and, what comes out on the other side is pretty bad. So always remember too, you want to leave a little bit of dynamic range for the codec to work.
This also has to do with the whole principle of psychoacoustic encoding that these encoders have, that they put to use, like MP3 and AAC and anything that's a lossy encoder. If you feed it energy across the entire band, how's it really going to throw any data out of that without sounding bad? And I'm kind of oversimplifying the model here, but if you think about using an MP3 encoder to code silence, well, that's not too difficult. It's not too hard to encode silence at 128 kilobits per second. It can be done. So take the other extreme where you have like some song produced by Phil Spector, right? So it's this wall of sound. How are you going to encode that? How is the encoder going to decide what can the human ear not notice if it's gone? And the answer is going to be, well, there's a lot more stuff that you're going to notice if it's gone than if you're going to notice that some silence is gone. So, indeed, codecs are best used with audio that's kind of natural, that's got natural dynamics. Now, I got to say, there is an example of an internet streaming company that I think does a pretty good job making their streams sound punchy and almost want to say loud and exciting, and that would be the folks at Goom.com. We did one of our shows from their studios just across the river from New York City. Just if you go to don't do it now, please. Go to Goom.com, Goom.com, and you can listen to some of their streams. And these guys kind of do push it to the limit, but I think they're below that limit. The songs sound very good. But if you want to be safe, sound good at low bit rates, keep the audio simple, and there's no reason to just crank on it. Chris, Chris Tobin, you guys do a lot of streaming there. You got some advice on processing for that?
Yeah, we do a lot of streaming. What I find works the best is, as Chris Tarr pointed out, is just limiting the bandwidth. If you're on a very limited, say, HD2 or 3 carrier that you're not running very much data, definitely shape the audio going in. I find that keeping the codecs, the input to the codecs below their operating level, if, say, minus 20 dB full scale is what they normally expect, I try to be about maybe 5 to 6 dB lower than that as my peak energy. And I find that the codecs tend to be a little more friendly to encoding the audio. And I did some research, and I forget what paper it was. I think it was a Swedish company talking about how, the perceptual coding, when you sort of not overdrive it, but just reach the, I guess it's, the operating level or just above the operating level, it tends to, not create artifacts, but sort of sound strange. You know that thing when we're listening to audio processing, somebody goes, yep, that's it. That's what we're looking for. That's the sound. And you're going, yeah, I think I get what you're saying. I've been reading up on this stuff, and it seems to be the same in the perceptual coding world. Unless, Kirk, you've heard otherwise. But I find running them just a little below their normal operating level works the best.
I don't know why that would be. I haven't experienced that myself, but I haven't really played with it. I'm sure if you go over, that sounds terrible if you try to. But I don't know why that would be, why it would sound better at a few dB below.
I'm thinking maybe it depends on our source material and how much peak energy it has, because I've recently been monitoring a lot of our audio across the router with the Dero meter. And watching, I noticed there's a lot of peak energy above the average lately on some of the material we're not getting in for, say, the music stations. And then the talk, it's just, each voice is different. But I'm noticing there's a lot more peak energy where in the past I think we probably lost it in either the way we transported the audio, even in the case of the radio lines. If you had radio lines to your transmitter, not the PulseCom APTX type, but the old-fashioned copper, they were pretty much like phase scramblers when you think about it. So
yes, yeah.
A lot of peak energy you never really got. So you used to be able to crank and do a lot of stuff. And I still have folks right here in town that from time to time still have their old copper lines and love the way their STL audio sounds across those compared to the clean, crisp digital connections they use.
You know what? I actually go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say another thing I found lately. We've been starting to put our AM stations on HD3 channels, and we use pretty low bit rate because obviously they're mostly talk. But AM radio processors such as the Optimod 9200 work very well for HD streaming because they're made for the limited bandwidth of AM. So you can really narrow those down and fit some audio into an HD3 stream at a very low 16 kilobit stream rate, and sounds really, really good because it does a very good job of almost brick wall limiting or rolling off audio, filtering audio at those frequencies, just because of the AM occupied bandwidth specifications. So I found that those actually work phenomenal for streaming talk formats on HD subchannels.
I would agree, and I think that especially those the Optimod processors meant for AM are really kind, especially to male voice, and make them sound quite good on AM. So if you're looking for that kind of effect, that carries through very well into the streaming. Chris, Tarr, you mentioned a moment ago. Don't know if you said it accidentally or if you meant to. We were talking about rolling off the high end, so it's below, any energy is below the Nyquist frequency, which is again half the sample rate. But I heard you say roll off the low end, and it was always my belief and experience that hey, MP3, any kind of coding handles bottom end just fine because there's so little work to do to encode that.
I found that low end tends to sound fake when you do a lot of it, and radio people tend to overdo bass. So when streaming or doing HD, I find that I tend to roll off the bass a little bit. I think it sounds a little tighter and a little more true when you do that. It's a personal preference. I don't think it actually, the low end, I think you're right. I don't think it really affects encoding too much. Other than because you're rolling off the high end, it can really sound imbalanced if you don't compensate for that on the low end.
Ah, okay. All right. Sure.
Yeah,
So
I would agree.
Yeah. That balance, that's kind of an interesting concept there too. If you're rolling off the audio at say 8 kilohertz or 9 kilohertz or 11 kilohertz or some such to stay under Nyquist, then if the low end is processed, so if you got a male announcer with a deep voice, he's really kind of rumbling along there, and if you're putting audio in that goes down to 55, 60, 65 hertz, and there's a lot of energy in that because it's been processed, then yeah, I can see how that would sound unbalanced, and you'd want to tone that down. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yep, it's exactly what I'm talking about.
Gotcha. Hey, we're going to take a break right now and talk about one of our sponsors, which is Axia Audio. And hey, at least two of my co-hosts here are or have been Axia users with some experience. So I want to talk for just a minute about a new product from Axia, our sponsor, and that is two new consoles that were introduced at the NAB show. If you want to follow along at home, turn your hymn books to axiaaudio.com. That's axiaaudio.com/IQ, or the other one, axiaaudio.com/radius. And these consoles, the IQ console, we had this idea that, we've been building, I say we because I work for the company, we've been building consoles now for a while. We started out with the Smart Surface, and there's several hundred of those out there in the world. In fact, Tom Ray, you've got some Smart Surfaces there at WOR, don't you?
Yes, sir. We've got 9 of them. And
9?
Yeah. We got 9. We've got 9.
That's where they went to.
Yeah, we got 9 studios. They work well. We've we've been in that studio facility now for 6 years, believe it or not. And I think I've replaced a couple of button boards and 1 power supply.
Okay, cool.
They just sit there and run.
So that's the Smart Surface was the first console that Axia made. The next one has been the Element console, and that's a very, very flexible console. That there's literally tens of thousands of combinations of modules and positions that you can build up a console. So if you're interested in the Element console, check out axiaaudio.com. It's very flexible and very powerful. But if you want to save some money, if you're on a budget, but you don't want to give up a lot of features, then check out these 2 new consoles from Axia, the IQ and the Radius. The IQ comes with 8 faders, and then you can add more faders to it. You can add an expansion module to give you 8 more faders and even 8 more faders. You can have up to 24 faders on an IQ console. If you need some telephone control, well, there's an expansion module that has 6 faders and a telephone controller that controls a new Telos phone system called the IQ6. And there's also a panel that has some control buttons and 6 faders. So you can get these in different sizes. You can have 8 or 16 or 14 or 24, 22, or 20 faders, all different combinations. You get OLED metering displays and OLED channel displays. You get a rotary knob at the top of every channel strip that lets you set the gain or select a new source. You get you can program your which buses that you're feeding any fader into. The faders are really rugged. In fact, I'm not going to say they're waterproof, but they're water resistant because the stem that comes down from the knob and goes into the fader, it doesn't go straight down into the fader assembly. It actually goes around the side and enters from the side of the fader assembly. You can see a picture of that on the website. In fact, if you go to the Radius console at axiaaudio.com and scroll down a bit, you can see our smooth and silky fader assembly there. It's very, very cool. Well, then the console, the IQ and Radius consoles, also do automatic mix minus, so you don't have any errors with people making up mix minuses live on the air. You're always going to have the correct mix minus going out. Well, hey, the IQ console starts at about $8,000. You can get a 24 fader console for under about $12,000 US. The Radius console is even more affordable. Instead of OLED meters on it, it uses LED meters. They're really quite sexy, but they're not as expensive as the OLEDs. The only thing about the Radius is you can have as many faders as you want as long as it's 8. The Radius is 8 faders. It'll never be any more. You cannot expand it. But it's a very basic audio over IP console for under $6,000. That includes the part that goes in the rack that has the built-in Ethernet switch with power over Ethernet. It has analog inputs, analog outputs, an AES input and output, and GPIO, contact closures, to run your tally lights or your CD player or your automation system. So it's fully networkable with other consoles in the Axia system. Just want you to check it out. Check out the Radius, check out the IQ. The IQ is shipping now. The Radius shipping later on this summer from Axia at axiaaudio.com. All right, guys, let's continue. I want to bring up a little bit topical news here about this flooding that we've had. And Burke, in the control room back in Petaluma, has photos that he's going to show us from a couple of transmitter sites in Memphis, Tennessee. Burke, if I can wake you up, have you got those for us? There we go. This is. Oh, I want to mention the website that these are from. Our friend Barry Mishkin at thebdr.net. So you can see these pictures in all their glorious color if you go to thebdr.net and go to the story about this. So we're looking at some serious water here. Let's see. The transmitter site on your left, that's WDIA in Memphis. That's with the Mississippi River at 45 feet. That platform is 18 feet above the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
These two pictures were taken by Gary Condry of Clear Channel in Memphis. Let's see. We scroll down to the next one, and you see there. I'm following along at home here. This is one of the WDIA ATUs. Yeah, the #1 antenna tuning unit.
Wow.
Might take 3 to 5 weeks for the water to go down. If we scroll down a bit more, there we go. Here's the transmitter site of KWAM, KWAM. Well, that's a station I used to do some engineering for, but not at this location. They built a new, much nicer location. But this is on May the 6th with the river at 46 feet. Wow. And we scroll down a bit more. There's there's some antenna. There's an isocoupler at the base of this tower. Gary Condry took these as well. These are, again, part of the KWAM site. And then a bit farther down, there's a damaged tower. This is not. This tower was brought down on Friday, April the 29th, and the station was moved to a different site. So this was taking it down intentionally.
I wonder why.
I don't see anything wrong with it, really. It's a little beam tilt, But other than that,
Yeah,
it looks good.
it looks like your glass there, Kirk. Come on. What's wrong with this picture?
Oh my goodness. So, you guys at your transmitter sites, you're not in flooding areas, are you?
Tom,
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah, the WR site, flood stage is 9 feet. We're built up. We're 12 feet above swamp level. So, and I've seen the water in the last 5 years there. I've seen the water come up about 7, 8 feet. Almost a flood stage, but not over. And not too far up the road, up in Hasbrook, and not Hasbrook Heights, Rochelle Park, New Jersey. Back in it was either 99 or 2000, Chris, when the central office there, the phone company central office flooded.
Yeah, I think it was 2000. Yes.
Yeah, that was in a 200-year flood stage, and for some reason they put the power supplies and everything else in the basement. And unfortunately, that central office is where the trunk lines from New York City come into Jersey. All of us down in the Meadowlands with transmitters, actually anywhere in northern New Jersey, we had no dial tone, we had no ISDN, we had no equalized service, we had no T1s. We had nothing. And when you came out of the Lincoln Tunnel, it was like going into no man's land. You pulled up your cell phone, zero signal. That was pretty scary.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Huh. So Tom, help me understand that the Meadowlands area. I've been through there. I've been to your transmitter site. Where does that water come from? Is that ocean? Is it brackish, or is it some fresh water from a river?
Well, where we are, it's brackish, but it is tidal there, and that tidal comes from New York Bay, which is actually the Atlantic Ocean that comes in, and it's tidal there. So it goes up and down. I mean, there are times of the day, when the channel out in front of the building, there's nothing there except mud. And there are other times when it's 3/4 full in the culvert, and that's a 10-foot culvert down there. So there's a lot of water that moves.
Oh yeah,
so
I've seen it. Our transmitter site's just down the road from Tom's, and we got through the same thing. It's
we have fish, we have crabs, we have ducks, we have let's say I got three raccoons.
Tom, you don't need to go to the grocery store before your picnic. You got all your food right there.
Oh, I know exactly. Well, yeah, but unfortunately, we're right off of one of the a place called Berry's Creek, and Berry's Creek is one of the most polluted waterways in the country. So I don't think I'd want to eat anything there.
Well, at least the food will be well preserved.
This is true, but let me tell you, I mean, and I'm sure Chris's place over at 1010 Winds is the same as our place. We had to I had to walk out into the swamp last summer for something, and this was the middle of July, and it was the dry season. And let me tell you, I was up almost to my knees at one point. You stand on the mud and you just go plunk and sink. That's it.
Yes.
Done.
Yes.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Same for us.
So if you have a transmitter building that has gotten flooded, where water's come in, water's risen above the floor and up into the let's say you've got I guess transmitter designs are a bit different now. They used to have a lot of high voltage down in the bottom with rectifiers and high voltage transformers and such as that. What kind of repairs would you expect to have to make from a flooded transmitter site? What happens to the parts that get underwater?
Well, in one of our stations in our Hartford cluster in Meriden, Connecticut, WMMW AM, we've got the transmitters and the equipment rack built up. Oh, they're a good 2.5 to 3 feet off the floor, because that site floods, and actually is flooded right now. When the building itself floods, the phaser gets wet. And we generally have to drop power and go non-directional at that site when that happens. But you go in, you hose down the coils in the bottom, and you.
What? You mean you had more water?
Oh yeah, just you have to clean it off.
I thought water was the problem.
But this site itself, this is a site that we bought the station. This station, this particular iteration of the transmitter site there was built in I'm going to say 83, and I don't quite understand why knowing that there's electrical equipment in this building, why the town allowed it to be built the way it was at grade, which is right at ground level, especially since it's on leased-town property, because they know it floods. There's a creek right there, and springtime, forget it. You get the snow runoff, and the place just it's underwater. You can go out in a boat and go fishing if you want. It's unbelievable.
What if I told you that I had heard of an older Gates or Harris FM transmitter with the incoming AC power, the commercial 3-phase 240 volts, basically on the bottom of the transmitter going through a fuse block on the bottom? What if I told you that I'd heard of a transmitter site where that was covered with muddy water and the transmitter was still on the air? Does that make any sense?
I suppose I could see that happening. I would doubt it, but it wouldn't. Certain things wouldn't surprise me. Depends on what's in the mud. I mean, it could make a great insulator.
It did make sense to me, but this is what I was told by somebody who worked there before. Oh, yeah, we had 6 inches of water in the transmitter, and it was on the air.
I'd be more worried about that plate transformer in there going kabang with water in it.
Well, some of the earlier model transmitters, the older transmitters, the bottom half was just the transformers themselves. And the laminations on those, if you ever looked at some of the old ones before the PCP laws came into play, it's very conceivable that the lower half, the lower 6 inches could probably be well insulated with the lamination and work, because your bleeder resistors.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, the bleeder resistors and other stuff were probably above. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I've had some of those older transmitters with Collins, and the lamination on the transformers was pretty thick, and I would imagine you could probably get a good few inches of water in there, and probably still be okay as long as it didn't come up over the terminals. I mean, those are pretty stocky transformers they had in there.
Yeah, I had a Collins FM that I remember distinctly. The lower half of the cabinet was strictly transformers. The bleeder resistors were about midway on the side panel, and there was pretty much nothing on the bottom, because when I would vacuum it out, I remember not worrying about breaking anything because there was nothing there. The one I had was 831. I think it was an 831 D1, and I mean there was really nothing down there that. So, Kirk, it's very possible that that rumor you think that may not be true could very well be true.
That would be pretty amazing, huh? I guess, like any flooding, you can have a lot of cleanup to do. If you've got wallpaper, if you've got wallboard in your transmitter site, that's gonna get mold. You're gonna have to cut the wallboard out and then replace that, unless you get a mold infested transmitter site. Not probably the first place on the list of places to fix, though, but it still could be important. And I've never had to clean up. As long as I lived and worked near the Mississippi River, somehow I never had to clean up after a flood. Nothing serious. Well, I tell you what, I sure feel for all the people on the Mississippi River, not only the ones losing their homes and such, but hey, broadcast engineers who are having to work overtime to keep getting the message out. Guys, we're going to take a quick break right now and hear from our friends at Netflix. This part of this episode of This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Netflix. Netflix delivers movies directly to your home, and that really does save you time, money, and hassle. Hey, I was getting the other mail from the mailbox today anyway, and look what came in the mail, my next DVD. Now, of course, I stream, movies off Netflix. But here's one. I'll open it up here. You guys are wondering what the movie was. It's seems like I got Raging Bull, the collector's edition, part 1. I didn't even realize, or disc 1. Didn't even realize that there's more than one disc. Robert De Niro won an Oscar for his portrayal of self-destructive boxer Jake LaMotta in Martin Scorsese's widely acclaimed biopic, which paints a raw portrait of a tormented soul unable to control his violent outbursts. I can't wait. Raging Bull. Hey, you can watch as many movies as you want, anytime you want, by streaming them. Never any late fees or no due dates. In fact, I could forget to mail this back for a year, and I wouldn't get a bill other than the usual monthly fee. And you know what? I think my daughter's probably gotten hold of a movie or two and end up under the bed or who knows where. well, find them later. Oh, I guess that's why we haven't got any new movies yet. Got to send this one back. Netflix streaming pick of the week. Some movie that you can stream. Well, let's see here if Kirk can look at his instant streaming queue and see what's. Oh yeah, I've got to admit, I'm a fan of Reno 911. So you can stream. Yeah, you can stream the episodes from 2003 to 2009, seasons 1 through 6 of Reno 911, created by Ben Garant, Kerry Kenny, and Thomas Lennon. The show is described as being goofy and raunchy. Yeah, I would say that's about right. Reno 911, available for streaming. Mr. Tarr, do you have a Netflix pick that you can stream?
I do. Hot Tub Time Machine, starring John Cusack.
Oh, jeez.
Do you have to send the kids out of the room? Oh.
No,
Oh, yeah.
well, it's probably a little more adult, yes. But a great movie, especially, again, that's one of the great things about Netflix. I don't know that I'd go and spend a lot of money to watch it. It was, it got a few stars. Was, not an epic by any means, but it's a fun movie. It really is. And especially if you're like me, growing up in the 80s, a lot of references to the 80s, a lot of 80s music, and a lot of fun. And of course, John Cusack is awesome in everything he does. So that's my pick, Hot Tub Time Machine.
Mr. Tobin, do you have a streaming Netflix pick?
Yeah, I have actually two, because if you want to do comedies and have a great time laughing for an evening, you have The Producers, the original one with Zero Mostel. You could stream it in DVD.
Yeah, that's in my queue, my instant queue, yeah.
Yes, and do Stripes, because if you want a good laugh or just laugh it out, that's the fact, Jack. Just go for it.
Stripes, that's right. What a great movie, and that's available for streaming. Tom, how about you?
Blown up, sir. Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know if you can stream this, but you mentioned the TV show before. Remember the TV program Police Squad with Leslie Nielsen?
Oh, I thought it was a movie. He
had 3 movies. Well, he had 3 movies, but this is the TV show. It only lasted.
Oh, I love that. That was a great series.
Oh,
yes, and there's a DVD. I think you could stream it.
DVD only.
Awesome.
DVD only.
Great show.
DVD only. DVD only. Well, that is good. I just clicked and added that to my DVD queue. And you know what? Don't tell my daughter, but I just moved that. I might move that up ahead of the Care Bears.
Actually, you probably should.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks to Netflix for sponsoring the show. You can go online and get 30 days free by going to netflix.com/twit. Netflix.com/twit. Enjoy 30 days of service for free. Sign up for your free trial right there. Thanks very much for Netflix for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And we know everybody here is already a member, client, user of Netflix. So, you can buy a subscription for your mom, your uncle, your sister, whatever. Your friend next door. It's pretty cheap. It's what, under $9 a month. I think for the DVD, I'm thinking of paying about $9 a month. So check it out. All right, onward with the program, and we had a number of other little things to chat about. One of them was there's some talk within the FCC about the public file. The public file. Most folks don't even know that there's this thing called the public file. And a lot of radio stations get in trouble for not keeping their public file up to date. Does it really do any good? Is it just a burden of paperwork that means nothing or next to nothing? Is it actually a really good way for the public to come into the radio station and find out about how the station operates and how they're fulfilling the requirements of their license from the federal government? Or is it time for the public file to go? What do you guys know about this public file controversy?
Well, seeing as the public file actually lives right outside my office, I've been at WR 14 years. In that 14 years, we've had exactly, besides the state inspector, we've had exactly one person come in and ask for the public file. They had no clue what they were looking at. They had no clue what they were looking for. They looked through it and said, yeah, it looks like it's here, and they walked out the door.
What do you think the person was trying to do? See if you had one, because they heard maybe from somewhere that, hey, if you catch a radio station without the public file, or if it's not organized properly, they can get in trouble?
Well, that was a possibility. It was also during the license renewal period when we were talking about it on the air. But I mean, basically, if you look in the public file, I mean, there's not a heck of a lot that means anything. I mean, your license is in there. Well, you're required to keep that at the control point. You've got stuff on the political ads you sold.
Yeah.
Is that really necessary in these days? Letters from the public.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You know, there's really, besides the licensing stuff, there's nothing really significant in there.
If our listeners care about this, you can easily go to Wikipedia and look up public file. Some of the things that you have to keep on file in this file that would be available to the public would be your station authorization. That says, hey, here's your license. Applications and related materials. So if you make an application to the FCC, a copy of that has to go in there. Agreements with citizens. Not sure what that might be, since we're all citizens. Or if you're not a citizen, would that agreement not have to go in there? Contour maps, a political file, material relating to an FCC investigation or complaint, equal employment opportunity file. There's a document called the Public and Broadcasting. And this document, even though it's available from the FCC, must also be in your public file. Letters and emails from the public. Now, this is a little onerous, isn't it? I mean, what if you're Howard? Well, Howard Stern's not on a licensed station. Oh, by the way, if you're not a licensed radio station, if you're a internet broadcaster, for example, Leo Laporte at the Twit Network, does he have a public file? No, he doesn't have to. But if you are licensed by the FCC, then you have to have a public file. Go ahead.
I was going to take the devil's advocate side here. You know, we do the airwaves are public; they're owned by the public, and I think in some way, we have to be held accountable to them. And you know, some of the rules may be a bit onerous. Some of them sound onerous, but really aren't. You know, for example, the political file. All that is it keeps us in check, because again, the way the rules state is, you know, if one candidate comes in and I give him a rate of $10, I have to give a $10 rate to every other political party or political candidate that wants to buy advertising, which is fair. But that's how you prove that, is you have that information in the public file. Letters from the public. If something goes on and a lot of people are complaining about it, well, I think the public has a right to see that. I mean, instead of us saying, oh, nobody said a word about it, you know, trust us. So, you know, I think some of that stuff is legitimate. Even if nobody looks, I think the fact that it keeps us aware of it, I think it keeps us on our toes, knowing that at any time somebody could come in and take a look at those things. I think it forces us to, you know, to take a good double, you know, very close look at what we're doing to make sure that we're filling those requirements. And I think that alone is worth doing.
I appreciate that that side of the argument, and I can't argue with any of those things, but I have some interesting things to say against those. Again, this issue of, does anybody come and look at it? The stations I've worked at, I get one person has ever come and looked at the public file, and that was the owner's ex-wife. And she wasn't caring about the radio station. She was just trying to, you know, get something on the guy. The other thing is that it's a heck of a liability for getting a fine. For example, if you don't follow the equal opportunity employment rules, and you know, some stations have gotten in trouble for this. There was a case some years ago with a religious station, KFUO, in St. Louis, and they wanted to, their Christian religious station, they wanted to hire Christians. In that case, if I'm not mistaken, went to the Supreme Court. But they got in trouble because of what was or wasn't in their public file. And then there's, if you don't just have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, the FCC can make an inspection and can fine you for what is or isn't in your public file. By the way, neatness counts. I have been at my own radio stations when an FCC inspector came in, said after he checked a few things, says, all right, let me see your public file. And the general manager of the station said, well, sir, it's right over there. I'd be glad to open it for you. He says, no, I'll open it. So it was actually in a file cabinet. He opens it up, and everything is in tabbed folders that are not handwritten, but they're typed out. It is color-coded by section with a legend in the front as to what each color-coded section meant. The FCC inspector opened it up, ran his thumb across it, and he said, my, that'll be just fine. and closed it back up.
Well, I tell my clients that I do consulting work for that I would say good 90 to 95% of the time, if your public file and your AIS logs look good, that's as far as they're going to look, because they figure if you've got that stuff covered and you've paid that much attention to detail, that probably everything else is okay. One thing that you need to mention in this discussion is there's a big move to going to digital public files, to scanning these things and not keeping them in a filing cabinet anymore. I know our company is discussing that, just doing everything as PDFs and making it searchable at a workstation or something like that if somebody wants to see them. And that, you still have to have the same amount of documents, but it makes it a whole lot easier because a lot of the documents are filed with the FCC and are available for download. So it kind of takes a little bit of the kind of the paperwork edge off of that.
Okay. Yeah. Chris Tobin, you deal with plenty of public files there in New York City, 6 stations, right?
Oh yes, we've got our handful, and we have PDFs. We put a lot of stuff. The emails and letters from folks are now on DVDs in the file, and we have a workstation near the public file cabinets. So if somebody does decide to review, we have a medium that a machine they can access for the medium. Let's see, as Tom pointed out and Chris, I think we've had. Well, back in the day when we had the controversial talk shows on a couple of the FMs. Opie and Anthony, to name a few, Howard Stern. We used to get regular visits for the public file inspection. Since those programs have moved on to different forms of broadcasting, those inspections of the public file have diminished considerably. So, it comes and goes depending, I guess. I guess it's a double-edged sword for stations to have it. Keep you honest. As we all know, self-governing sometimes doesn't always work.
Is it still required to have a list of issues in the community that you serve? And it's the issues and programs list. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So every quarter or so, you're required to somehow determine, whether it's by polling community leaders or some other method, to determine what the issues of the community are, and then what programs you have put on the air to address these issues. Have I got that right?
Yep. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, is that worthwhile? What do all music stations do except run some public service show that their AM station recorded the week before, and they play it back at 5:30 Sunday morning?
Well, the recording of it, I think, is a good idea to have that in the file because, like Chris Tarr said, these are the public airwaves, and there is a regulation. We kind of have to earn our keep. And for a talk station, it's real easy. We're talking issues all the time, constantly, local issues. And every morning, I mean, the producers, like after the morning show, he comes in basically with a ream of paper about what they talked about, and it goes in the file. So got all that information.
And as a music station, we actually produce. I mean, it does run. It doesn't run at 4 in the morning. It does run at 9 o'clock Sunday mornings. We actually produce a program for each of our FM music stations. We bring in people from the public, from the community, to discuss issues. And that's something that we take seriously because, that we're licensed to, at the pleasure of the public. And, it's little more than a token thing anymore to comply with the law, but at least it's something. And it's in a media market like Milwaukee, some of these organizations that that talk about their issues on Sunday morning for an hour, that's their only outlet. They're not going to get on the media anywhere else to talk about what they're going to talk about. So it does still help, and it's still there, and it's still free to them, and it's still informational. So I think it very much still has a place because, it kind of, again, makes us do that. And as much as I like to say we're altruistic, we're a business. And sometimes businesses, especially businesses where we're using public facilities, sometimes have to be kind of pushed in the right direction, I think.
Someday we're going to have a real interesting discussion about this whole notion of the public airways, because you're going to get an argument from me. See, I think the public airwaves should have been treated like land in Oklahoma. Okay, here it is. We'll give out your 40 acres, and you improve it and do what you want. Then you can sell it if you want to, or keep it as long as you want. But hey, that's just me. I bet I can get Brian Brushwood on the same network to agree with me, but maybe nobody else. Oh, I bet Dvorak would agree with that. That's the libertarians' view on the public airwaves. But anyway, I digress. But I think that'll be a good debate one day. We'll have to do that. You guys will beat up all over me because I don't know that much about it. And we've been all our lives we've been hit with this notion of it's the public airwaves, like it's a national park. Well, it's only valuable because broadcasters made it valuable, or because cell phone companies made it valuable, or two-way radio or taxi companies or whatever made it valuable. The government that doles it out and can take it away at any time, they don't make it valuable. There's nothing
I couldn't disagree with you more, because especially nowadays, we do a horrible job of serving our communities most of the time. In fact, I think there are some days, and again, my opinion, I want to be very clear, is different from that of my employers. But I think, there are days when we should give it back to the public and let people to actually serve their communities and serve their neighborhoods. And, if it weren't for the fact that we have to do something token just to keep doing it, we wouldn't do it at all. So I think very much so, because not everybody can do it. I say, my opinion is, okay, if you want to do treat it like 40 acres, then let everybody do it and fight it out.
And and of course, had it been handled that way from the beginning, that's what would have happened. Of course, then you'd have people who would buy up everybody else. And even if you had doled out frequencies in the first place, back in the 20s or 30s or 40s or whenever, like you handed out land during a land rush, I think you'd probably end up with about the same landscape you have now. You'd have a Clear Channel, and you'd have an Entercom, and you'd have a CBS, and then you'd have some mom and pops here and there in places where the Clear Channels and the CBSs and the Cumuluses were just not interested in operating. I think you'd have a situation.
Right, but on the other hand, if somebody does something really egregiously bad, at least right now, there's a way to shut them down. That's all I'm saying.
I would argue that if somebody does something really egregiously bad, they're not going to stay in business. The financial support will dry up and blow away. Nobody will listen to them, or very few, and advertisers will not support them. And they can beg all they want for money on the air, and if they're really doing something bad, they won't end up having the support. And I can right now name you 8 radio stations that I know of that went off the air because the guy that operated them had no clues to what he was doing and operated them very, very badly. And so, yeah, they're all off, and the frequencies are available to be applied for. In fact, the licenses were were canceled by the FCC just in the last couple of weeks.
Well, they're not available to be applied for. You have to auction them, and you have to pay for them. And
now there's that whole auction thing, and there it is. The government going on like they add value to the frequency in the first place, so they have the right to auction it off.
Well, that money just goes to supposedly to self-fund, so that's not really placing a perceived value on it. We've actually had some in Wisconsin here that went up for auction, nobody bought them. So, but of course they were in areas nobody really wanted to be in.
Yeah, like West Undershirt, Arkansas, or I got you. Hey, the stations that I have in American Samoa, one of them was a first come first serve, and back in the day before the Telecom Act of '96, when we had first come first serve licenses, that was because somebody was interested. Somebody got it added to the table of allotments, and then nobody's really interested in actually putting down some real money and putting their capital at risk to actually try to build something. And so those stations became first come first serves. And in fact, in my radio career of partial ownership of stations, probably 6-7 stations have been first come first serves in places that nobody wanted them, like Dermot, Arkansas. Do you really want a station in Dermot, Arkansas? So, but we added some value, sold it, and the next guy that came along, he doesn't have the license anymore because it took care of itself. Anyway, I can tell right now this would be a very good discussion, because Mr. Tarr, you do have some good points, and you take, I think, what is the traditional view, and it's just traditional because it makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. But I just have a view that may have an alternate setting. Hey, we're gonna have to go, guys. We've used up our time and then some, and maybe waxed too philosophical on the show this week in Radio Tech. I want to thank first of all our sponsors, Netflix, at netflix.com/twit, TWIT, and get your 30-day free trial. Also, thanks to the folks at Axia Audio, axiaaudio.com. Check out the new consoles, the IQ and the Radius. Really affordable, fast to install. I've done it myself. It's really quick. Hey, thanks to our co-hosts here, Chris Tarr from Mukwanago, Wisconsin. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Chris Tobin from Manhattan, the best-dressed engineer in radio.
Thanks, Kirk. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here. Hey, I might see you in a couple weeks. I'm thinking about coming up to the city. I'll see you.
Excellent.
And Tom Ray from the Hudson Valley. Thanks, Tom, for being with us.
Thanks, Kirk. Always a pleasure. Always fun.
And maybe I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Hey, I hope so. Come on in for the picnic.
See if we can grill some of that duck and possum.
By the way, I was going to say, by the way, anybody who's going to the Dayton Hamvention a week from tomorrow, actually a week from Friday, be looking for me. I'm going to be out there all 3 days.
Ah, okay.
Dayton.
The Dayton Hamvention. Oh, yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. We'll talk about a bit more in future shows, and that is on the Twit Network. There is going to be a new podcast. It'll be a ham radio show hosted by Bob Heil. It's supposed to launch on Tuesday, May the 24th. So later on this month, you're going to get to hear about, if you're a ham radio enthusiast, you're going to want to check it out with Bob Heil here on the Twit Network. We'll have more information coming up about that. But I'm eager to participate in, but to hear that show myself. I don't have much to add, but, I sure would like to listen to it. Hey, thanks, everybody, for listening and watching. You can catch repeats of the show. You can also download the audio version of the show at twit.tv/twirt. That's hard to say, isn't it? twit.tv/TWIRT, twirt. There's also video versions of the show, high and low bandwidth. Check those out as well. You can subscribe to them also in the iTunes store. Get them downloaded automatically. We appreciate you doing that very much. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech.